This cabin was the funeral pyre for 18 miners who were taking a fortune in gold out of a canyon that had been forgotten by time and civilization. A hidden source of wealth that has lured miners since 1864 behind the lost door to Never Never Land.
Hi, I'm Bill Burrard. The program is Treasure, and this story is one of the most fantastic legends to ever come out of the old Southwest. It has a good many ingredients: Apache Indians, a lost canyon, and a gold mine that's become famous throughout the western part of America as the Lost Adams Mine. Now, many people believe that the Lost Adams Mine is somewhere in the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. The known facts are it was discovered in the year of 1864 by James Adams. It seems that Adams and some 25 other miners were led into a lost canyon by an Indian. A lost canyon that was hidden from the world by a big boulder that literally formed a door to the outside. Beyond that boulder, Adams and his men found an area of wild, desolate, rugged beauty. And more than that, fabulous wealth. But because of a bargain they failed to keep with the primitive Apache Indians, they paid a price for that gold that will be remembered as long as legends of the Southwest are handed down from father and son. Now, the story begins right here in Tucson, Arizona.
In 1861, James Adams began working as a freight hauler between Tucson and Los Angeles. In August 1864, he delivered a load of freight in Tucson, started back to California. Now, Adams had no way of knowing on that bright, sunny afternoon that he was destined to live through the most terrifying experience of his life in a remote canyon that he'd never heard of, and that fate had chosen him to lead an expedition that would go down in Western history as one of the most exciting events of all in the colorful story of Arizona gold mining. It was here in Gila Bend, Arizona, after being attacked by Indians, managing to escape with only his horse and saddle, that Adams met a friendly Indian, an Indian named Gotch Ear, a wandering native of this territory who had joined forces with a group of white men, 20 miners who offered to buy Adams 12 horses so they might develop a gold discovery in the mountains nearby. Hearing the miners talk, Gotch Ear announced that he knew of a hidden valley where a man could find gold nuggets as big as a turkey egg. His claim of hidden fortune earned Gotch Ear the promise of 2 horses from Adams if he would agree to lead the white men to this unheard-of source of wealth. Well, Gotch Ear agreed to Adams' proposition. But when the miners questioned him further, he would only say that the hidden canyon was in Apache land, and that he was the only man in the territory who knew how to find it. And so, Adams and his party of 20 miners followed the strange Indian for several days and nights, going deeper and deeper into the private domain of the unpredictable Apaches. And then, one day, Gotch Ear took Adams to a mountaintop, and he saw it at last. So they went down into this canyon with its primeval beauty and its ominous silence, not knowing what they'd find, but urged on by the hunger for gold. 21 men, ambitious, eager, unaware of their strange appointment with death. The Indian Gautier led Adams and his men behind a huge boulder that formed a secret door to the outside world, and later that day they camped beside a waterfall on the canyon floor. Gautier calmly announced it was here gold could be found. And so they began hunting for it. And discovered the Indian had been telling the truth. The canyon was a rich source of the precious metal. Adams paid off Gautier as he agreed to. The Indian guide left for Mexico. Adams and his men confidently looked forward to a future of wealth and security. With all this gold, fresh water, grass for their horses, they could work their claim for years to come. They built themselves a large cabin in the floor beside the fireplace. They put an Indian pottery bowl, covered it with a heavy flat stone. At night, when they returned from their work, they all deposited their nuggets in the common hiding place. Each man could have left the canyon a rich man. And then it happened. They had been warned by Nana, the Apache chief, never enter the territory of his people above the waterfall. But there was gold up there. The men were greedy. So they paid a terrible price for their greed. Adams returned one night to find the cabin in flames. Bodies of miners strewed around on the ground, dead and dying and screaming. Adams himself managed to escape. The terrible war cries of the Apaches burned into his memory. Of the 21 miners, only Adams and 2 others were able to elude the enraged Nana and his warriors. Traveling only at night, Adams tried to remember the landmarks surrounding the canyon so that he could return for the gold, and then one day he was terrified at the sound of horses. Convinced it was Nana, peering around he saw a party of cavalrymen that took him back to civilization and to safety.
And now I want you to meet the man that we assigned to do this particular story for us, Milas Hinshaw, an expert on Western lore. Milas, why did you choose this particular treasure legend?
Well, because the Lost Adams Mine is one of the most famous treasure tales to come out of the Southwest. It has a lot of intrigue involved around it when you consider the hidden canyon, the burned-down log cabin with its chimney still standing, and beneath that chimney there may lie several $100,000 in nuggets. Now, if that isn't enough to warm the heart of any treasure hunter, I don't know what would.
Well, the money is certainly enough to warm the heart. You know, Milas, I was looking at this very crude Apache war club, and I never realized how really primitive these people were. But why do you suppose they chose to massacre the Adams party?
Well, the reason's very simple, actually. When the white men arrived at the hidden canyon, they met the very famous Apache chief, Nana. And Nana told them that they'd be all right. They could mine the canyon floor area, but if they decided to come up out of the canyon, that there'd be trouble. Well, Adams assured them that they'd keep their activities in the canyon floor. But unfortunately, he didn't have quite the control he should have had over his men, and some of them did go up out of the canyon, and for that reason, Nana massacred the entire party.
Well, Milas, where would you start a search for this type of a lost mine?
Well, we started in Tucson, Arizona, and tried to follow the exact trail that James Adams had taken in 1864. Tucson, Arizona, as you know, Bill, is quite a resort town. People come here for that wonderful Arizona sunshine and just to get away from it all. We'd come here for an entirely different reason, to visit the Arizona State Historical Society, which has its headquarters right here in Tucson. The Arizona State Pioneer Historical Society has newspapers, documents, letters, and books that date back into the period that we were interested in, the 1860s. So we took the opportunity to look through these documents and newspapers and see if we could find information dealing with the Lost Adams Mine.
Were you able to prove that Adams had lived in that era and had discovered a mine?
Yes, Bill, with the research material that we had before we left, plus the documents and records here at this historical society, we were able to substantiate the Lost Adams Mine and the story of the lost door to Never Never Land.
From Tucson, we traveled north to Phoenix, Arizona. Now, this was probably the first large town that James Adams stopped at when he was coming through from Gila Bend. It's also the largest city in Arizona and the state capital.
Well, while we were in the Phoenix area, Bill, we were invited to attend the Indian Thanksgiving Festival, which is held each year at the Pueblo Grande ruins. Now, during this time, Indians from all the major tribes gathered together and performed their dances, many of which date back to the beginning of time. The first dance you'll see is that of the Kiowas from the Central Plains area of the United States. And the particular dance they're going to do is called the shield dance, or a war dance. One of the most colorful dances of the day was put on by the Cochiti Pueblos from New Mexico. It's called the Buffalo Dance and is a dramatization of the relationship between people and animals. It emphasizes those animals that provide food for the Indians during the winter months. The dance goes back to the days when the Pueblos used to organize community groups and journey to Texas to hunt the buffalo. Finally, Bill, we got a glimpse of the people we'd come so far to see, the White Mountain Apaches, the same tribe that massacred James Adams and his party over 94 years ago. The dance you'll see them doing is called the Devil Dance. It's used during a young girl's puberty ceremonies and to ward off evil spirits and epidemics. Now, the dancers represent the mountain-dwelling supernaturals called crown dancers. The paint the devil dancers use on their bodies cannot be washed off. They must sweat it off during the course of the dance. Bill, we traveled northeast, following the route that James Adams had taken so many years before. Our destination, the town of Globe. From there, we'd head into the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. Before we get there, though, we see the magnificent Salt River Canyon, one of the more spectacular sights to be found in the state of Arizona.
Finally, we arrive in the Apache Indian country, the Apache Indian reservations. And here you see the type of rugged country that James Adams and his party were forced to go through when Gotchier took them into the lost door to Never Never Land. Our research shows that James Adams and his party stopped at Fort Apache. And if this is true, more than likely he passed by the Kanishpa Indian ruins. Now, these ruins were here long before the Apache even came to this country. No one knows who built them, but they're one of the best preserved Indian ruins to be found anywhere in the United States. Just a few miles from the Kanishpa ruins, you finally arrive at Fort Apache. Unlike the Fort Apache, Bill, that you've seen so many times in motion pictures, this one is very substantially built of stone, masonry, and of cut lumber. It's very different from the one that you see in show business.
You mean to tell me that this stable, what it appears to be a stable, it was actually used by the cavalrymen?
That's right, Bill. There's 3 of them there. And as you walk down these dark corridors and look in the empty stalls, you can still see the names of the old troopers and the names of the horses carved in the wood above each one of the stalls. The log cabin you see here was the home of General Crook, one of the greatest Indian fighters of all time, who was one time the commandant at Fort Apache. It was from this fort that they waged the many wars against the Apaches, which were some of the bloodiest wars in the history of American Indian campaigns. The amazing part about this trip, Bill, is that the Indians of today live much like their forefathers did hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They still live in the traditional wickiup, which is made of yucca plants that are stretched over the bent branches of trees.
Certainly a far cry from the modern day that we live in.
Yes, it is. The people themselves, though, however, are quite industrious, and today have become very successful as cattlemen, and they've built some motels, and they put in gas stations, and believe me, they're a very, very progressive tribe of people.
Do they have their own form of self-government?
Yes, they have their own tribal councils, and it's hard when you look at them, Bill, to believe that this is the same people at one time were known as some of the greatest warriors to be found on the American scene. While we were there, we visited one of the most unusual police forces, I think, that can be found anywhere in the United States, the White Mountain Tribal Apache Police Force. And as you can see, Bill, it looks like something out of a Western movie.
I'll say it does.
They all have cowboy hats, they all have guns strapped on, and as you look in their faces, you can see history. I mean, these are the people that massacred the Adams Party about 94 years ago, and it's really quite interesting to talk to them about it and talk about where perhaps the lost Adams mine is located. While we were there, the chief volunteered to show us one of his police cars. Now, this is a rather unique type of police car. It's a pickup truck, and on the back they've constructed a cage. Now, when they find one of their own people who has committed some sort of a crime, they put him in the back of this, and off they go to the hoosegow.
I imagine it must be kind of a wild time when they get a call in there.
Oh, it really is. I mean, it's just like the old days of the West. I mean, Buddy was just getting ready to ask them some more questions about the lost Adams mine when they got a call to head them off at the pass. And away they went. Well, it was obvious we're going to have to get information somewhere else. And that we did. The next day, we talked to a man by the name of Tom Guiata. Now, Tom is an old-time prospector who's been in this area for many, many years. He personally has spent over 40 years mining this particular area, searching for that big strike that would sometime make him wealthy. He had many theories on the lost Adams mine, and although he hadn't found it, he was still looking. Well, the next day, we decided that we too would have a look for the fabled lost door to Never Never Land. Now, Bill, the only way that you can get into this country successfully and see it is from the air, as we're doing now.
I understand what you mean when you say this country is rugged and wild.
Yes, Bill, the country around the Oak Creek Canyon, Fort Apache Indian Reservation area is some of the most rugged to be found anywhere in the United States. And this shot here, you can see why it'd be so difficult to see the cabin down there, Bill. The shadows fall down into the bottom of the canyons most of the day. And it is a pine-covered area. And in the passage of time since the massacre took place, more than likely the cabin, the remains of the cabin, have been covered with undergrowth and with trees.
Boy, that looks like it could be it right down there.
Yes, it matches it. It has the stream, it has the sheer walls, it has everything that the lost Adams mine supposedly has. But there's only one thing wrong, Bill. Every canyon looks the same in this particular part of the country. Someday, Bill, there's going to be a day when they're going to be flying high up in the sky like this, a day when perhaps the airplane and the helicopter become more universal in their use. They're going to be flying high over a canyon, and suddenly they'll spot it, a chimney standing deep in a canyon. And when they find that, they'll find several $100,000 in gold.
You know, Miles, the only thing that kind of bothers me is that with all the people that would look for buried gold, that they couldn't possibly miss a cabin that held 25 men in it.
Well, you would think so, except my personal opinion is that they haven't been looking in the right place all of these years.
Well, do you have a theory? Do you know where you think you'd go back to look for it?
Well, in years past, all the search for this particular treasure is centered around Four Corners, Arizona, the northeastern corner of the state. Now, according to the research we did, I believe that the treasure is located somewhere in the Oak Creek Canyon area. When we were down at the Arizona State Historical Society, we went through the newspapers there, as you saw in the film, and there were several accounts of the treasure being located north of Phoenix. Now, that would put it approximately in the Oak Creek Canyon country.
Well, actually, then, the people have been looking quite a few miles away from where the gold may really be.
Well, I think so. I think that there definitely is some basis of fact to the story because of the amount of people involved and the fact that it is substantiated by the records of old Fort Apache.
Well, it's interesting conjecture anyway, Miles. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A fascinating story. A massacre, lost canyon, savage Indians. All part of the history of the lost Adams mine. Well, this is Bill Bird saying until we meet once again on Treasure, goodbye and good hunting.